Okay, thanks for joining us, Ethan. I appreciate your time. We're going to try and keep this to sort of a beginner level discussion here. So for those watching on YouTube, don't get too scared. But today we're going to be talking about sort of website speed and what business development managers can do in their limited capacity on the IT side to improve website speed, which will make the website a bit more usable. When we talk about speed, what are we talking about really? Does 1 second really matter? Why should we be focused on website speed, especially for like a law firm website?
Right. So I think a lot of people overlook or potentially don't even consider site speed. And I actually checked just before coming on here the exact percentages. And after research that has been conducted, it was found that 53% of people will click off a website if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. So in other words, if your website is taking even 100 milliseconds, 3.1 seconds, you could be losing 50% of your traffic compared to if you had a website that was loading in 2 seconds or 2.5 seconds. And I think on top of that, I believe every 100 milliseconds after 3 seconds is something like a 2% or 3% traffic loss. So speed is really, really important.
So we're getting into the millisecond here too, right? So so every little thing that we can do is going to have an impact, I guess, right? Now I've been hearing a lot about the Google Core Vital thing that the algorithm changes. Can you briefly explain what that is and why that's sort of bringing this issue to light now a little bit more than before?
Okay, so general site speed, like the overall loading time of a website, has been quite important for many years now. However, recently, because overall site speed is very broad, right? It's hard to know how to make your website faster. So in the update that Google is rolling out right now, they've introduced Core Web Vitals, which are essentially three specific criteria. So there are three specific speed factors that you can actually work towards, rather than just saying, hey, your website needs to be faster than 3 seconds. So currently, they're not very important, the Core Web Vitals, but they are used to increase ranking.
Okay. Now, does page speed have an impact on your Google search rankings? So does Google sort of penalize your site for being a bit slower, or is it really the content that's affecting the search rankings?
So yes, content is key. Content is always like the biggest factor. However, site speed, having a slower site is not a disadvantage, but having a faster site is an advantage, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, got it. So I want to quickly touch over some of the factors that impact website speed. I think we all kind of know a little bit about these, but then in the second half, we're going to really dive into some of the tools that we can use to check speed, to decrease image size, all that sort of stuff. So I guess the first one that we all kind of know about is image size, right? So we should be not uploading the image that our graphic designer gives us or from the website. So what is sort of the optimum image size? Are we talking millibytes, kilobytes? What's on there?
So yeah, this really depends on what kind of image it is. If it's a banner image or just a logo, which you want to be very small. However, like all photos should be basically as compressed as possible. You still want photos to look good. It's hard to define like the size they should be because the sizes always change, but they should definitely be probably in the tens of kilobytes or hundreds at most, because you want your whole page to be in the megabytes if possible or under.
So each page should be about a megabyte or under, right?
Yes, it depends on the type of page, but basically the smaller the better, and under a megabyte is normally what I would aim for.
Okay, so we'll talk about this a little bit more. Maybe we'll demo some of the tools that you can use to compress the images. But so we have website speed. What are some of the other factors that really affect your page loading speed?
So yeah, images is probably the biggest one. Then you also have your actual hosting. Your website has to be on a computer somewhere, and basically how fast that computer is will directly impact how fast your website is. So hosting is a big one. Also, like how streamlined your website is, just how, this is a bit more technical, but just how well coded it is.
When you say like streamline, is that sort of like how the HTML coding like loads like from top to bottom, and like I think there's something like lazy loading, things like that, right? So all of that is really impacting the load speed, right?
Yes. I think a big one is a lot of people like to install plugins on WordPress and then uninstall them and then install a new plugin. And I do this myself, but every time you install these plugins, they leave something behind. So things like this, right? It's leaving unnecessary code on your page. So making sure only the essentials are there is a great way to speed up a website.
And that's difficult with WordPress because you find yourself like, oh, this plugin looks good, or oh, this will do what I need, and oh, this looks nice. And then before you know it, you have like 30, 40 plugins, and then your site is quite bloated. Okay, so HTML, hosting, what was the last one that we wanted to cover? CDNs?
Yes, CDNs.
Can you
So,
walk us through what that is? And then after this, then we'll kind of do some demos and go through it.
okay. So CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. And every website has files, right? HTML files, image files, all kinds of different files. And usually when you have hosting, you will choose a location. So your server, your website itself might actually be based in, let's say, New York or Melbourne. Usually the hosting locations are big cities. However, if your website is based in, let's say, Melbourne, and somebody from America or New York is trying to access your website, it's going to be naturally slower because their request has to go to Melbourne through, under the ocean, and then it has to go back to New York. And that adds a lot of loading time. However, CDNs, they take these files that make up your website and they basically distribute them around the world. So there may be parts of your website hosted in London, some in Mumbai, just all over the world. And this speeds up requests for people who aren't close, who aren't in Australia, right, where your original server is located.
But isn't that something that the hosting does? Or is you need an extra sort of, was it content delivery network, CDN, to
Yes.
do that for you?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so that
hosting doesn't do that.
okay, so that's quite important for law firms because we get a lot of international traffic, right? So I guess one of the first things that the BD teams need to do is check with their IT team and say, okay, who's hosting our site, and then what sort of CDN do we have? They may not have a CDN; they're sure to have a hosting site, right? All right, so
Yes.
maybe if you can share your screen a little bit, and we can sort of walk through some of the do's and don'ts and what some of this looks like.
So on the point of CDNs,
Yeah.
uh, Cloudflare tends to be the most popular. And I'm sure you may have visited a website before and it comes up with the little loading thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And it says, please wait 5 seconds. That is Cloudflare. And Cloudflare is very popular because, like I said, it can distribute your website basically across the world and it's free. So it may not be the fastest CDN, but just adding Cloudflare to your website will massively increase, or I guess decrease the loading time for anybody who's not based or not from the same location as your website. So implementing Cloudflare is very straightforward, and like I said, it's free. So
Yeah, I did
it's
it for
incredibly
the
popular.
yeah, I did it for the BD Roundtable and it's pretty easy. I was like, is this really free? And I just kept going and going and click OK, and then it was set up and it seems to work. Hasn't had any negative impact on it. And you mentioned that there's sort of a privacy aspect to Cloudflare, right?
Yes. So Cloudflare is also, I think the reason they offer all of their services for free is because of the security. And I believe that, I just log in here. I believe that the security is probably the best benefit of Cloudflare over other CDNs because other CDNs tend to focus purely on speed. And while speed is great, the added bonus of having these privacy features built in is also fantastic. So I was just trying to log in here quickly. because if I go to the security tab, you can so there are a lot of functions built into Cloudflare, and one of the best ones that I mentioned previously was it can like obscure your email address so that bots going to your website can't find that, and that's very helpful because I'm sure everybody has ended up on some random emailing list at some time that's totally irrelevant to them. These emails are usually found on websites by bots, and Cloudflare helps to obscure that. They also can protect your website from DDoS attacks, so attacks that could otherwise impact how many people or how people can access your website. So they have like an under attack function which you can just enable, and that will basically block a lot of this bad traffic instantly.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it has a lot of functions and it's
So
free, so there's no downside.
awesome. So most CDNs can offer this sort of stuff, right? Some may be paid, some may be a little bit faster, but this is probably the best option that's free, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And yes, the best one for security too.
And this is on top of hosting.
Yes.
Okay. Can we touch a little bit about hosting? I think most law firms already have a host, right? Their IT teams probably set this up long ago and they're probably sticking with it. But anything that we need to know about hosting, any sort of red flags? I see you have Bluehost there, which is horrible, right?
So yeah, obviously, I know a lot of people already are using Bluehost, and I have a list of hosts here actually. So when you get into like web development, there is the infamous EIG company, and I believe it's like an investment group, and they own a ton of hosting companies. And basically, among like SEOs and among web developers, the consensus is to avoid any company under EIG because they tend to buy up these companies and, for lack of a better way to put it, they make them kind of crap. They
So
become very slow.
what makes a bad host bad? Like, are they bundling websites together under one server, which makes it load slow? Like, why is one bad and one good?
Generally, yeah, it's generally speed. So when when a user comes to a website, when they're initially trying to contact or request the website, there is a delay, and that delay is often particularly long with, I guess, worse hosts or lower quality hosts. So having a faster host just speeds up your website. And also, if you have a better host, there may be more processing power, so it can do functions on your website faster. But yeah, basically just having a better host to a certain point will make your website faster.
How about other sites like Squarespace and Wix and Webflow? They do the hosting themselves, right? So you wouldn't need a separate host for that. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I've only really used like Shopify and Wix, never a Squarespace, but all of their hosting tends to be pretty good. And like you said, it's all built in, so you don't go for a third-party host.
Right. And then so the speed on these other sort of alternatives that's not WordPress is pretty good because of that, or everything because
It tends
everything's
to
all in
be.
one system, it's okay.
So there's the hosting, and then there's also the actual website speed, right, which comes from the images and using CDNs and how bloated the code is. So typically, if a Squarespace or a website that comes integrated with the hosting, if a website like that is slow, then that's generally an issue on the website itself.
All
Whereas
right.
with WordPress, it could be the host, or it could be that your website is uh, not streamlined, not fast.
I see. All right, so let's touch a little bit on how to measure your website speed. So we'll just mention a few tools, and then in the Q&A, then we can kind of go over and delve into this a little bit more. So for those watching on YouTube, head over to the bdroundtable.com to watch the extended version where we discuss all of this. So, all right, so how do we measure our website speed? What are some of the good tools for that?
Okay, so there's a massive range of tools for measuring website speed. You can just Google website speed testers, However, I tend to use 3 or 4. The first one of which is just loading now. So this is called Google Page Speed Insights, or Google PSI. And this is like the official Google website speed tester. And at the moment, I'm just running a test on Amazon. So you can see here, it comes up with an overall score, and you can toggle between mobile and desktop at the top here. And mobile and desktop speeds are both very important because, I mean, these days, tons of people are using smartphones. However, smartphone or websites on smartphones tend to load a lot slower because people might be using, well, still 3G in many areas, or 4G, which tends to be slower than home internet. So it divides the results into mobile and desktop, and then gives you an overall score. And you can see they kind of rate anything 49 or below as red, aka it needs a lot of improvement. Yellow is 50 to 89, which means that the website is doing okay, but it could definitely improve. And then green is anything above 90. And these scores are based on a range of different factors.
Okay, yeah, these are quite complicated. First, content, full paint. Yeah, we can get into some of those in the Q&A section. Okay, so we can have the Google tool. Any other preferred
Yes.
tools?
So another one that's very good, and probably the tool that I use the most, is GTmetrix. So this is called gtmetrix.com. And this website provides a lot more details. So it looks a lot more complicated initially, but a lot of these things are actually relatively straightforward. Like it shows you a visual representation of what elements are loading when. So this is great for if you have one image that's not loading properly, you can see exactly what that image is and when it loads. And you can also see the exact issues, like what's taking a long time to load. And if you go to structure, you can also see the exact factors, not just, it covers everything here. So you can pass that on to an IT person and say, hey, these are the issues that the site has and why it's loading slowly. So we need to fix these.
Well, that's something I think BD teams can do immediately, right? Just test their website's page, get this structure and find the main issues and call up the IT team and beg them to help you fix it, right?
Yes,
okay.
definitely.
All right. So GTmetrix looks pretty good.
And
Any other?
the one other one, so a lot of these tools kind of overlap and do the same thing. So the one other one that I wanted to show, because it provides a significantly different test, is .com tools. And the reason I chose this is because on the free tier, if you don't have a paid account, you can actually choose to test from 3 locations at once. And this is important because, like I said before, if you have a website that is based somewhere, let's say Melbourne again, and somebody from New York or London or another city or country far away is accessing it, then it's going to be a lot slower for that person. And this tool can test from a range of locations, and you can see exactly how the different locations are actually impacting loading time. So I would expect Amazon to be very fast because they definitely have CDNs in play. But even here, you can see the New York load time was almost double, or more than double that of London. So there's a massive, massive difference based on location. I'm not quite sure what's happening to Hong Kong here, but I would also expect Hong Kong to be pretty fast.
Right. Okay, so that's pretty clear. All right, so I think we're going to transition into the roundtable because I have a bunch of questions about the results and stuff. So before we do that, for those watching on YouTube, what's the best place to get in touch with you?
just via our website. There's a contact form on that. So valiolegalmarketing.com, and then the emails and contact form is on that website.
And you guys specialize in helping law firms with a whole host of issues, right?
Yes, just content marketing like SEO and paid advertising.
All right, sounds good. I'll put the link in the description and I'll put you up on the website. So thank you very much, Ethan. Appreciate your time walking us through some of these. And again, for those who are watching on YouTube, watch the extended version where we continue this conversation and get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of these results. So thank you. Have a good day.